So welcome everyone to a new episode of Rise and Play, and we are in our special series about India and gaming in India, back from my trip from IGDC. And today I'm super pleased to have Roby John with me from SuperGaming,
Pleasure.
that I've met also at IGDC and with all the hype around Indus. And thanks for joining again this
Pleasure.
morning or this evening for you.
It's 4 p.m. here.
Yes. All right. So before we start, maybe a bit of background as well for the listener who don't know yet about you. So Roby co-founded Super Gaming in 2019, and you serve today as the CEO,
Correct.
overseeing the development of its games such as City Royale, Battle Stars, and the upcoming super exciting from my GDC. I saw Indo-Futuristic Battle Royale, Indus. And before, you founded and served as the CEO of June Gaming, which I've known of as well, mobile shooter company based in Pune from
Correct.
2015 to 2019.
Correct.
And a bit of background as well about Super Gaming is one of India's leading gaming company, founded as well with a co-founder that I will name here, Sanket, Crystal, Srijit, and Navneet.
You got that right.
Yeah. Oh my God. I'm so proud of myself. And as we will talk maybe a bit more about Indus today, as the Indo-Futuristic Battle Royale, which gets a lot of hype. I think it's a whole theme that gets a lot of excitement, not only for Indian players, but globally.
Thank you.
For mobile, PC, and console, as you are cross-platform. You are also developing, you have developed other games, such as we mentioned, Battlestar, City Royale, Tower Conquest. What is more interesting about the background of Super Gaming, it's about your own gaming platform that you call SuperPlatform for launching, running, and hyperscale real time multiplayer games. And your mission, because that's important also to mention the mission, and that's how we connected, is to build India's gaming revolution. And that's not a small thing,
Thank you.
but I see you're very committed to that mission.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's begin with the start as well as you have quite a background in gaming and also your previous company. I was curious more about your journey overall as a founder, entrepreneur, a person that how you got even into games, then building your first company, then second company that you can share with our listeners today.
Sure. We got into games because the iPhone came out in 2007. I got my wife an iPhone, and then I realized that we could actually build for it. So I was officially the first iPhone developer in the country back in 2008. Launched a bunch of
Mm.
games. Our story was small: three guys, a dog, and a dream. That's how we started June. One of our games really took off, and that's really how we became a gaming company. So we spent about 5 years building educational titles first through a company called Tap to Learn. After that, what we realized is that we'd gotten very good at building games. But for 10 years before I kind of started making iPhone games, I was a backend engineer. So kind of combined both our background as backend engineers and our experience building for the iPhone or building iPhone apps to kind of build mobile games. We only make one kind of game. If you see our entire journey, we only make real-time multiplayer, which combines both of our strengths. And that's really what the company does today.
And you did mention as well that you, when we've met, you had a background. I don't know if it was professionally, but as a teacher teaching, and
Correct.
I
So I
can see
taught.
that.
I also taught at the University of Pune for about 12 years, from 2000 till 2012. So a lot of the early employees that worked at June were students of mine.
Yeah, and that's I think for me quite a strong foundation of maybe the way you build the company, which was really in the learning as you started with educational games, and also we'll get into that in your second company, Super Gaming. Even the way you are elevating a lot the employees, the creators of the games, and the whole community building. And I think
Correct.
that's part of as a teacher is important in your story because you can see some elements of that through the companies you've built.
Correct. I won't take credit for being a teacher. My entire family was actually a teacher. My grandparents owned one of our very large schools. My mom was a professor in English as well, and that's kind of how I inherited those genes, I think.
Mhm. And then it's not a straight line like from teaching to building a game company, but there's so much power, in games and creating communities and learning through playing, which I'm sure you have seen through your first company. And I would like to pause before we get more into super gaming, your
Sure.
journey when you built June Gaming and for the different stages, because you started small, but the company grew, I guess, and became quite big and still today big. And what were the different phases? What have you learned as building the company and that you took with you after building SuperGaming?
Of kind of being an early iPhone development company was kind of seeing the growth of seeing the distribution that the iOS platform kind of gave you, seeing what Android did, seeing what was happening inside of India. We were a very early kind of early batch at Y Combinator as well in 2011. So kind of saw and ran the company, the educational games company Tap to Learn in the Silicon Valley, learned from all the people building games in the Silicon Valley, took some of those learnings and then kind of brought them to June Gaming, where we kind of focused on building what we were good at. If you're competing in that market, we kind of realized that there would be something that we really need to be good at. And that was real time multiplayer. That was something that's very hard typically. You don't have those strengths within the same company. But we as as founders, we kind of realized that was kind of our strength. That's kind of how we started building it. We started building a title. Our first title was a game called Ninja Dash. And then we learned from that, built Mask Gun, which is really the first shooter that we built. We were trying to build CSGO for mobile at that point of time. And that was in 2015, where everybody would laugh at us and tell us that it's not possible to build that for a phone. And but that's kind of we realized that at that point of time, what we were seeing around us was all these kids getting Android phones and getting cheap Android phones. So building for that, we kind of thought as the future. So we built our own engine, built our own kind of expertise in building mobile shooters, and here we are today with Indus. About 10 years later.
I think this is very inspiring as well. As I could feel that energy when I was in Hyderabad and then Bangalore, um, the seeing the future, and you were at the time where everyone is telling you like, why are you doing this? This is crazy. Don't do this. And then you did it, and then actually, well, then some of us, I would say, skeptics were proven wrong because you did build and then a second company now. But yeah, it's
Correct.
interesting at that time, despite you didn't have necessarily the support, you were a very you had the conviction that you could do it, and also seeing maybe more of what I call the ground insights, because that's what I learned there is more you have to meet your players, see what's
Correct.
happening in the country, and you can't see it from a report where it's usually summarized and trying to put in a bag in the same thing together.
Correct.
Those observations that you have on the ground, right?
We actually we kind of understood two things from that journey of building Mask Gun. So I would say that building a shooter game that actually works on all kinds of devices and shipping a very small kind of package inside of it so that it runs on all devices. Mask Gun, when we shipped it, was only 150 MB, and
Oh.
we only launched it in Australia and New Zealand. It was soft launch on Jan 16, 2016, and for about the next 3 years it was soft launch. So we kind of learned quite a bit from our players. Our players would come in, they would actually tell us a lot more about the game. We would fix it, put out an update. And it was in soft launch for 3 years. India was the 37th country that we launched in. The US was the 43rd country that we launched in. So learned quite a bit from that journey of kind of working with the community, building that community from scratch. Every player on Masgun that we kind of had in the early days was my friend on Facebook. So I kind of learned quite a bit from a lot of these players on Facebook. I still had about 5,000 friends on Facebook who were active players of Masgun. I ran that community, learn from players what they really wanted. And I would say that, what's inspired the journey of Indus, so to say, was what I learned from the Maskan community. When the whole world was kind of celebrating Halloween, Christmas inside of our game, we decided to do something different. We decided to put Diwali, which is like a Indian festival, inside of the game.
Mhm.
And we put that, and I noticed that, from your LinkedIn, that you've actually understood what Diwali means. So we put Diwali inside of it. And what we suddenly realized is people were asking me, hey Robbie, what's Diwali? And it was really a lot of fun for me to tell people, like, Diwali is the festival of lights. That's like the Indian Christmas. Here's what we do. Here's what are the things inside of it: the fireworks, the crackers, the sweets, the lanterns. That's kind of what we explained to people. And we thought that was kind of cool because a lot of people wanted to listen to that, wanted to be part of something like that. I think from there we kind of learned and validated the fact that games are an expression of your art and culture, and people want to be part of that. And that's really what we've learned from various cultures, be it Vikings, Japanese culture, samurais, ninjas, anything else that you kind of see, you've learned through a bunch of games. And we felt like that was probably the ultimate art form to kind of share who we are and what our culture is, with the rest of the world. And that's really what you see inside of Indus today.
Oh, that's great to hear the foundation. And what I appreciated as well, that I could see very strong in the DNA of super gaming, you building a community exactly around the game, and building the game with the community, with those insights that you go and get. It's not just let's get from reports, and I do see as well the opportunity to share a bit more other celebration that happen in other parts of the world, and which are not smaller, but just we don't know about those.
Correct.
And you can actually use the game as a medium of self expression, and
Correct.
especially for a culture and a country. So moving from June Gaming to Super Gaming. So I just want to understand, as you started small, what was the size of the company at that time, the scale when you left June Gaming before even forming Super Gaming?
We were about 40 people at that point of time. So at
Ah.
Mascon kind of took off. It was success. We kind of we had a deal with Miniclip to kind of publish Mascon as well. So I thought that my work was done. And, what I understood from that journey was mostly the fact that, hey, as a game developer, one can't really capture the entire value that one creates. What I also understood by just working with various publishers, we did a bunch of publishing deals to keep our lights on at June. And what we realized is, hey, most publishers don't really care about your players as much. They don't really care about your community, and for them, it's might be just the ROI that they're interested in. And I felt like that was not what I wanted to do. I realized that, hey, to kind of capture the entire value of what you've created, you need to be a publisher. You'll need to kind of own the players. You'll need to be able to tell players that, hey, I built these previous games, be part of this community, be part of this next game that I'm building as well. People will know you better. And I kind of think that the internet has moved away from people not buying from a typical corporation or a nameless face. They're actually buying from people who make games. I saw that opportunity very clearly. And that's when I hired Sanket, my co-founder in Super Gaming, to kind of help build the publishing division of the company and think about our company less as just a game developer, but also the creator of IP, the creator of being a publisher across it, owning our players, but also kind of thinking about how to run a company differently. My background and history is all about doing 0 to 1 fairly decently, growing to about 30, 40 people, and then not knowing how to scale. I hired Sanket specifically because he'd done that. He'd come from a background like mine, which is bootstrap, but he'd seen a little bit of scale in a previous company as well. And I knew the co-founders of that company as well. And I thought that, those insights were valuable and would be applicable in terms of thinking about building a large company like what we wanted to do at Super Gaming. So we started in 2019. We raised a small seed round, about $1.3 million. Our first investor was Akatsuki, and that's kind of how we started. We were building social games because we believe that games are now a social network. When I was building Masgun, I kind of found people always chatting inside of my game. They were talking about everything, including that that their mother beat them up because they missed school, things like that, which is a little common in India. But saw that they were chatting about anything and everything, and games had become that social network. And this was around the time of PUBG as well, and that was set to explode. And that's really what Super Gaming started out with, by trying to build social games. We tried out a bunch of things. Our 12th game kind of became a massive success. That's Silly Royale. Silly Royale is really Among Us, but with voice chat built inside of it and kind of customized to run on lower end devices. Our core insight was, hey, people love voice chat when they're playing Among Us, but a lower end Android device can't really run a Discord server and play the game directly. So we kind of built a poor man's Discord inside of a game with voice chat. What we also did differently was, at that point of time, all of us were locked in pandemic, and what we were kind of playing, or I have two kids, 13 and 10 now, but I saw them playing games like, what we call in India Lapachupi or hide and seek or Chor Police or Cops and Robbers. And I thought that was a great opportunity to build these childhood games inside of a social deduction game like Among Us. That's really the modes that we built a mode called hide and seek. And in our first week of launch, where we were expecting 30,000 players, we got 1 million players.
Wow.
So, so that's really where Silly Royale really took off and kind of became the basis of our next game, which is Battle Stars. Battle Stars was a mode inside of Silly Royale. We kept introducing new modes inside of it, and shooting kind of became, a favorite mode for all of our players inside of it. And we have some background of shooters, so that's where we made Battle Stars as kind of a, like, if you see Brawl Stars is a MOBA made casual. And we kind of realized that in India, not many people play the MOBA, but everybody plays a battle royale. So Battle Stars is actually a battle royale made casual. The maps are specific cities of India, so like a Mumbai, Delhi, a Mumbai versus Delhi. The characters are all Indian as well inside of it. But we also kind of bought in YouTubers inside of it, so it has one of India's biggest YouTubers, techno gamers, as a character inside of the game. And that's really how we kind of built Battle Stars as a casual battle royale for our local audience.
Super interesting. Also the evolution of the first game starting from social. What I see and hear as well is the iteration. You didn't start with a mobile shooter, what we know of Indus, but it's more the iteration, the discovery with the community, and taking also insights from watching, not kids, more teenager. I would say it's
Teenagers,
like,
yeah.
I don't know these days even teenagers, kids at that age.
My kids would qualify as teenagers 3 years ago as well.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
much more grown up. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But that's what I meant. Like, I know that they perceive themselves as teenagers, and what do they play? What do they fancy?
Correct.
And through this iteration, one question is, have you, when you were building those games, were you intentionally focused on India as a market, or it happened to resonate more with India, although you were open to
No,
global?
no. I kind of think about a couple of things, like having built and run games like Masgun, Tower Conquest over a period of time, 3 to 5 years of kind of running the same game. I still run Masgun, which is now, I think, 8 years old almost. And I think that, one of the key things that I learned from it was, hey, data and insights are very important. They tell you the trends. You can kind of understand what's happening inside of it. But the second part of it was I also realized that games, like you said, need to be iterative. You need to keep improving those games. To improve make any game and to kind of improve it, you need a cheap source of user acquisition. And what we realized, if you see our background and history, all of our games, we have about 150 million downloads of our games, mostly organic. We spent maybe less than $200,000 in any kind of user acquisition in history. And that was mostly by building community, building a brand, getting users, telling them your story. And we found that in India, we suddenly were seeing this large growth after 2017, after what is called the geo revolution, where, two things happened, right? One is, internet was almost free now. All kids were growing up. India has a very young demographic, and that means a very large number of kids, 700 million people under the age of 25. All of the kids have grown up on mobile games now. We did not have a PC gaming culture before this. Mobile gaming is the only thing inside of India. And people who've kind of grown up on the mobile force or mobile game growing up have now started getting into the workforce. Once they start getting into the workforce, then they're also spending money. This is their favorite return of investment in terms of entertainment. And that's really where India started to monetize. India is a very young demographic. India is also a source of cheap user acquisition for us. We have lots of people who download our games because it's kind of made for them. It's kind of built with Indian identity, Indian characters, pieces inside of it. And we felt like India was an underserved population. We have 700 million people who potentially play games over the next 3 to 5 years, but there's no game built for India. In India, mostly even we were building for the world. So we kind of pivoted to kind of think heavily about, hey, what's the story that I can tell you uniquely? What can only I bring to the table? And what's something that people will struggle to kind of bring to India? And we realized that not just India, but we saw this happen in all countries, right? Whether it's a Korea, Japan, China. In the end, a local developer kind of dominated that entire industry. So at that point of time, we'd raised money, we'd kind of gone and spoken to a bunch of people, we'd kind of learned a little bit of history. So even in China, when you look at it, there were foreign made games that kind of dominated for a little while. But then, they took what is called the book Journey to the West, and they made those large MMOs based on that. Even today, you see Black Myth Wukong, you see a bunch of these. They're all based on, some kind of mythology, typically Journey to the West. And we felt like, okay, that's a way of telling a story. Start with something that people already know. And that's really the first thing that we did. Obviously, we kind of made it in the battle royale genre because that's a genre that India was playing endlessly already. But we started by telling a story, and telling a story called Indus, which every kid in India studied in primary school but doesn't know enough about. If you ask any kid in India what does he know about Indus, he's probably going to have four keywords: Indus, Mohenjo-daro, Harappa. That's it. Maybe the not so good Hrithik Roshan movie that's called Mohenjo-daro. And so people have only know this. So we said that, hey, here's an opportunity to do two things. One, tell them a story about Indus. Tell them that what if the Indus Valley civilization didn't really die? What if, it was so advanced that it flew off to a distant galaxy? And you're now discovering this distant galaxy in the year 2500. So that was really where Indo and futurism came in. But that Indo-Futurism angle was very heavily inspired by what we thought as what has worked successfully in every region. And the movie Black Panther came to mind, where you see Afrofuturism done there, wherein you've got the tradition, art, culture of Africa, but it also said Wakanda is the most futuristic city in the world. And this is a story that works in every continent around the world. It's also a story of hope. It's a story of kind of culture. It's a story that resonates with everybody inside of it. And it creates very heavy or very deep feelings within people. And that's really what we thought that we were able to kind of pull off and do when we thought about Indus, Indo-Futurism, and kind of designing our map to be, or our theme to be around the Wakanda of India. That's the easiest way to explain what we're building at Indus. I thought that also rallied a lot of people together because we were now doing something that's never been done before. From an art, culture, history perspective,
Yeah.
India has been underrepresented. You've kind of seen a lot of very stereotypical things about India represented outside, which is really the poverty, all of those. And I thought that that was also pre-Black Panther. That was also the narrative around the Afro-American or the African community as well. And we thought that that's a way to kind of change all of it, and kind of what you see behind me is to represent a different India. The first thing that Peter did for my team was to take the Taj Mahal, which is probably the most famous monument of India, and make it into that robot. So the Taj Mahal is a robot who has a personality. He's a droid, but with a personality, not a nameless, faceless one. We've done a bunch of content and characters by taking Indian art culture. Our other character was Morni, which is the Indian peacock, India's national bird. Pokhran, which is like a nuclear automaton. There's one called Macbalika, which is right in my background, which is an ode to the little girl child. The Indian girl child was treated like a puppet for many years, but now she's a very powerful kind of character in our game as well. So that's kind of how we kind of took Indian art, culture, stories and brought them inside of our game, Indus. When we talked about it, we found huge reception. People were very interested in both making the game, but also interested in telling the story about Indus, or hearing the story about Indus, because again, it's never been done before. Whether it's YouTubers, whether it's esport players, all of them started coming to us because something like this is happening in India for the very first time. And that was really the opportunity that we kind of saw in terms of building Indus. I know I've probably gone ahead a little bit from whatever the script was, but I'm happy to kind of tell a
No
little bit of
worry.
what went behind the creation of Indus, the original story of it, which you probably might not hear in a lot of places.
No, and I think here this is your gaming revolution, right? Because
Correct.
you are. I was watching the talk from your designer at GDC as well as a background, and it was really fascinating. In every studio, maybe company in the future may take their interpretation of India because it's a rich, very rich country. And then what is
Correct.
the narrative, a story you want to tell in modern ways through the medium of games? And that's your
Correct.
take. And I think it's
Correct.
very exciting. For me, not being familiar, I can tell you as a non-Indian, not being familiar with Indian mythology or history, I'm very drawn to it because it's very lively, it's very new, it's catchy, and it resonates with me, even if I'm not Indian. So I'm sure it will have its global appeal because it's part of entertainment. We have a
Correct.
curiosity. And I told you I love a peacock character. And if I could have a costume like this in real life, that would be my next
It's
cosplay.
you can see
Yes,
it in my
yes.
background.
I just love it. So great work from the artist, character designer,
Thank you.
because this is, I can see potential for so much of a, back to what you said, conversation of players around
Correct.
characters, the world. And maybe we can get a bit into the world you build because there's the characters, but there's
Sure.
also what is that power and resource that you have in your
Cosmium.
world that, yes,
Cosmium. Cosmium.
what is it? And I could see that also being a topic of conversation for the community. Yeah.
So what we wanted to kind of think a little bit about is not just the character lore story, but also typically if you see games, people have just created a setting around it or kind of defined a world. They've not kind of connected it to the game itself. They've not connected it to every action inside of the game. So we kind of said that hey, Indus is probably was in status, was in what we call Nirvana, but it had this precious metal inside of it, or this precious resource. We won't call it even a metal, and that's called cosmium. And that's why the rest of the universe is interested in going to Indus and kind of getting cosmium out. When we designed a battle royale game, we wanted to kind of think about what's the next evolution of a battle royale game. PUBG's been there for 5 years. It's invented the genre. Fortnite took it in a different direction. People have tried various twists on it. But we kind of took a very simple approach to it and said that, hey, we wanted to build a smarter battle royale, but we also wanted to build one with story and depth. So the way that we think about battle royales is think of a pearl diver jumping into an ocean. And sometimes he comes back with a precious pearl, but maybe sometimes he just comes back with a lobster or a crab or even seaweed. So every time that you jump inside of the world of Indus, you come back with something, or you have the opportunity to come back with something. So which is kind of combining battle royale and extraction shooters a little bit. But we said that hey, what's that precious metal that people care about? Why is the Coven interested in Indus? And that's called cosmium. It also ties into the gameplay itself. If you kind of see most battle royales kind of have one win condition, which is you got to be the last man standing. In our game, in the last circle, when people are in that last circle, what we looked at is player behavior in other games, and we realized that hey, people were just ratting it out, just waiting for others to show up, and so it was not very exciting. And we wanted to make a faster battle royale because I don't think people have 40-45 minutes of time on a mobile device, especially to kind of keep playing. We wanted to make a 15-20 minute game that was exciting, especially towards the end. So in that last circle, we spawned something called cosmium. You can think of it as what other games have already done. Like CS:GO does it with a bomb defusal mode, Valorant does it with the spike, which is, hey, whoever, there's an alternate win condition. In our game, if you're only one person fighting against a squad of three, you can still win by collecting cosmium inside of it in some kind of ninja way. And we actually had a recent esports event in the end of October, and there were a couple of games that completely blew our mind away, because players had figured out strategy on how to defeat other squads by collecting cosmium. And we felt like it makes it very watchable, but it also kind of lent a whole new layer to esports. And that's really
Mm.
what Cosmium is. We've not revealed yet in our lore what can Cosmium do, but I'll give you a hint. It has something to do with time.
Ah, so much teasing. And maybe we touch here on a point beyond the community. And because I see, like layer by layer, what you've created, not only like the platform, the tech platform, but then also Indus and the community building, then esports. And I wanted
Correct.
to spend a bit of time on the round, I don't know if you can call it a roadshow, a campaign, where I've seen some elements of it and going all around the country to meet the players and connect. Could you tell more about that, which also tells more about the culture you have at Super Gaming on really connecting with the players?
Sure. I think it's a culture of not just connecting with players, it's also connecting within our company. We have
Mm.
employees. The reason why Super Gaming grew so large is because earlier in June, I had this rule that you had to be in my office for me to work with you. So we only hired locally. When the pandemic happened, we opened out people from everywhere. So we had people all over India and the world come to work at Super Gaming. What we did post pandemic is to bring all of them slowly back to the office. So we actually have a very vibrant culture that comes from various parts of India. Parts of
Mm.
all of these people bring their own stories to the game as well. They actually bring, like Akito is our weapon designer and he's from Nagaland. So all the guns in Indus are made by Akito Cop. Akito's a real person. That's what nobody knows inside of it. So we started with these small things of kind of giving people ownership in the game. We wanted to tell our story of a game that's made in India by Indian people. So you'll see every one of my team on our YouTube channel. If you look at our shorts, you'll see every one of them: QA, development, designers, not just marketing people. And I thought that kind of gave real soul to the game, because we actually allowed people, or we kind of encourage people to tell their story through the game. All the characters in our game are made by Peter and Rahul. We actually have a vehicle designer whose name is Ayush. So all the vehicles in Indus are made by AYU Corp. Ganguly is the 3D artist inside of it, so he's called Gangster. And so that's what we did by adding identity, or like reason to kind of make the game, including some of our characters. They're named after some of our employees in the company.
Mm.
And that's really something that was very different from a previous approach that we'd taken. And we felt like, this was a story that allowed players to connect to us. How do we tell this story? We realized in India, nobody actually knows India. Nobody's actually gone to the grassroots. And even we didn't know India till we started going out to all parts of India. We went to about 17 cities all over India in the last 3 years, on the road, by car, kind of going and meeting with players and asking players like, hey, why do you play a PUBG? Why does this region play a Free Fire? Why do you not play a shooter? Oh, why do you really like Call of Duty? And we kind of found those various answers. And what we learned really shocked us, because that kind of gave us insights in terms of what we wanted to build. If I was to summarize what I learned from a lot of it, it was players asking me to give me the accessibility of a Free Fire, which means it runs on most devices, including lower end Android devices, as well as the esports capabilities of a PUBG. I think, if you were able to solve both of that, you had that golden connection. And that's really what Super Gaming did. Indus is very well informed to kind of build both of these. It's kind of
Mm.
looked at the failures of other games like an Apex or anything else that's kind of come to India and hasn't become a phenomenon, because I think it also ignored one very important part, that people have spent thousands of hours playing these other games. So if you don't build a skill transfer system to kind of people who, when people play your game, they've got to bring those skills of the other games inside of your game. So the elements of familiarity, but also kind of the enhance that own experience of them playing that game, whether it's with content which is Indian, whether it's with a new gameplay condition differentiated, the way that we build community. Here's a bunch of people that players relate to. I think my phone number is somewhere out there, so I keep getting about 50 calls a day from people asking me when the game is coming out.
Wow.
And so that's kind of something that certainly started happening. And I think that doing this grassroots research really helped us understand what players want a lot better. It helped us to represent each one of those regions inside of a game better. So you'll see inside of Indus also, it talks about North India, South India, East India, West India, all of those corners of India inside of it. And our hope is to kind of continue to bring culture to the fore, from tell those stories about India that nobody's heard about through our game.
Mm. But that's, I think, a great, for me, having worked on games more on product side, it's a great lesson of just building a game, designing a game with your players. But it's not, again, reading reports, but meeting them, because I have
Correct.
what we call player research, right? You can't see what you don't see in front of you. So when you get and talk
Correct.
to so many of them, different age, different background, because what you mentioned as well here, you visited different regions, which I understand are very different in India. We can't say
Correct.
it's a whole same country, but very
Correct.
different economic background, age, because there's a
Language.
reality to it. And
Language, yeah.
yeah, even language, exactly. And how do you solve this, where you make the most, I would say, global local
Correct.
experience for such a
Correct.
large country, and getting all those insights gathering? And even today, although you're the CEO, you still have conversation directly with players who are contacting you. And I think that's fantastic. I don't know
That's
when you
that.
sleep.
No, that's how I've always been. We've kind of
Yeah.
built this culture where we've been the most accessible to our players. Players have my phone number; they'll call me up. I've had calls at 2 a.m. in the morning saying that the game is down, or when a server is down on any region. And I think that's really the friends that I've made. I have Musgan friends of mine on Facebook that I'm still meet that have come and lived in my house from Singapore, and that's kind
Mhm.
of crazy. But and I've gone and stayed in their house as well. So when I go to a different country, I usually can meet a player of my game who's played my game for a long time. I have this crazy story about an investor called Nick Snolido from Eden Ventures. When I met him, he said that, Robbie, I don't invest at your stage. You're a very large company. I don't invest at this stage. But I told him that, hey, take a look at what I've done. So, 3 slides in, he says, stop. He takes out his iPad and he asked me, did you make this? And it turned out that he'd been playing my game for over 6 years. Yeah, and
Well,
and naturally he invested in my company, but and he's become one of my close friends and advisors. But I think that not only have we kind of made those conversations with players, but we've also had some players become our investors. So I think
wow.
that's kind of the ultimate way of thinking about, that's the company that I wanted to build, and that's really what I find the most exciting about my job. I want to probably add one more point inside of it, and you mentioned it briefly, which is that India is not one country. I think of India as probably 10, 12 different countries. What we did differently, we went to 15 cities all over India. But what we did differently this August is that we now realize that we can't go to every city in India. So we brought in a YouTuber or a player from every state and union territory of India who came to the
Mm.
Indus office on August 15, which is India's Independence Day, and kind of played the game with us. We've been real, we've been showcasing the games since over a year. But all of these players now went back to their states and made content in their language to tell the story of Indus. So that's
Mm.
how Indus has videos made in 20 languages without us even trying to do this. And I think that's not been done before. Earlier, I kind of thought about my company's mission as putting India on the global gaming map. When this started happening, when I started seeing what was happening on the grassroots level, when I started seeing esports players coming from very humble backgrounds and become the top player inside of it, I realized that what we're going through as a country is a gaming revolution. And all that we can do is to do our part inside of it and build. And that's why
Yeah.
SuperGaming's mission today is to build the gaming revolution of India, along with a lot of our game developer friends, but also with the entire community of across the spectrum, the entire ecosystem of players, esport players, influencers, YouTubers, streamers. That's really what we find ourselves privileged to be able to do.
Yeah. And it's amazing. I can see really a holistic company in that sense, that you are connecting over parts of what makes games, like this community, the makers, and
Correct.
also the game itself. And yeah, the investment part, it's beautiful, and it's very powerful. And I can see that energy in anyone that I've talked to from Super Gaming, including yourself. That level of energy, you wake up every day with so much energy and motivation. Like, this is meaningful to me.
Correct.
Yeah.
Sophie, the first thing is, the reason that we are so energized by all of it is not just who we are, but we've been around for a long time. We've been asking ourselves, when will India's time come? We've been seeing those new people kind of come in. Today, we realize that every employee that we get is so much better than us. He's been playing games for over a decade. He's understood everything about it. Every new person that we get is actually better than anybody that we hired previously. And so that kind of excites us the most, because we kind of feel like, hey, now is India's time. Now you have all the players who understand everything about games. When we kind of initially started making shooters, we had to buy everybody a CSGO license. Now everybody who comes in has 2,000 hours, 3,000 hours on any good game inside of it. He's probably much better than all of us inside of the company as well. And that's what excites us, that, this whole influx of talent. Everybody says India doesn't have talent, etc. I beg to differ. We've just been a magnet for talent by just being there for a long time and doing ambitious things. And we've been able to attract the talent to us with our mission of kind of doing something ambitious.
Yeah, and that's also super. But that I could feel when I was at IGDC. I was so impressed by the level of skills, professionalism, and even translated into the games. And I can see in your journey where you have built a company, made games, like you are really creating the ecosystem environment for the
Correct.
talents to come and form something, exceptional and big together. And that I
Correct.
could see it. So that's why I so much wanted to first give visibility to super gaming, but what you're doing and the impact of it, because many I'm sure will follow. Um, I have a few questions related more to the journey of super gaming, because this is
Sure.
an important part as well in for other inspiring aspiring entrepreneurs in India wanting to start, who knows, the company and be part of that revolution. I understood you started with a bit of funding. What was the journey of funding for you? Where are you today? And even in the size of a company, just also more for the more of the business part of super gaming.
Sure, sure. So I think two things, right? We started off by kind of making money first, raised a seed round of $1.3 million in 2019. Then about a year and a half later, we kind of had this idea about Indus and the traction of Silly Royale. Silly Royale was growing 3-5 million users a month, all organically. And that's when we raised the Series A. We did a Series A of about $5.5 million at that point of time. And that time we were still a 30% company. So we'd grown from being a 5-10% company before when we did our seed round, to doing a 30% company. We also kind of formalized our super platform and started making money on it, including running Pac-Man and a few other games on it. So Google Cloud today is our partner and sells super platform, much like PlayFab is on Azure, GameSpark on AWS. Similarly, we are that on GCP. So that's kind of our funding journey. We've raised about 17-18 million dollars, but we've also made money through our games and through our platform. And what we've done, essentially, we're a tech company making games. So we are really kind of, we have 100 plus engineers today. We're about 150 people, have a little bit of a burn, but kind of are doing something ambitious. But we've kind of built everything, not raising a lot of money. We've raised less than $20 million overall.
Mm. And that's also a great journey where a part I see, um, that's the sentiment I've had talking to a few, some of the studios there, trying to raise what you need, but also building a lot and starting to generate revenue. And as you have traction, as you need to expand. And the other part I wanted to highlight is also for the people who believe that there's not much to do in India or to invest, it's quite serious capital. These
Correct.
days in Europe, it's just even hard to get 1 million for any funds, where no one wants to invest in a company, especially doing mobile games. So I wanted also as a contrast, where there are things happening in India and there's a serious capital coming to companies like yours and others in the ecosystems, to where you can do quite a lot of things as well with those rounds and with the capital you get. And as we are reaching the end, there's so much, like, I'm so grateful for a conversation. It will stay with me. I feel very inspired from just hearing what you've done. And I see also maybe future opportunity for countries, because it's not in Indian audience, but Southeast Asia. I know I heard like in Vietnam there's a growth as well, maybe to get inspired by what is possible as you get, the muscle, the capital, and the skills to build games with the stories of your country.
Sure.
What are today, looking forward to at the end of the year, next year, your aspiration out? What do you look forward to, you as
Sure.
Robbie?
Sure. So I think, first of all, I want to kind of just close out some of the things that we did on Indus. It's not just the art, it's not just the culture and the stories. The visuals, the music, the dance forms are all inside of
Yes.
Indus, including the martial arts form. We took Kalari Petu, which is actually a 2,000-year-old ancient historical art, martial art, which is actually the father of Kung Fu. Like, Buddhist monks took it to China and the rest of the world, but it was actually originated here. Those are all things inside of our game. I even got my co-founder W to dance the Bhangra. So if you go, and he's kind of in our mocap, and you'll see a video around him. The music inside of Indus is also all traditional Indian instruments, and these are all things that nobody realizes. But When you take the sitar, the saro, the morchang, the tabla, the santur, the sarangi, the mridingam, the dhol, and put them inside of a game, you can create the rhythm of Indus. And you'll see all of our videos use custom music from Indus, whether it's Hindustani, Carnatic music, but also kind of influences of Indo-Futurism, where you've got heavy metal, you've got progressive metal, you've got folk music of India. And that's really what I feel excited about. Finally, creating representation for who we are. When you think about shooters or any kind of games, they're actually played around three axes, right? Autonomy, mastery, and relatedness. Autonomy and mastery don't change much. The shooting elements of the game, the thousands of hours that you kind of play to master the game, you got to build those skill ceilings. That's what we learned about. That's what we know about making guns. The relatedness aspect is what we heavily indexed on. And that's why everything that you see inside of the game is things that you'll relate to, both from a personal perspective, but also from a content or a culture perspective. In the past, we shipped many updates of our other games and call them content updates or localization. Or we didn't spend a lot of time. We think that today, content or culture is actually our best live ops tool, because
Mm.
everything that's coming out from the game is telling a story. And our streamers, they love us for this aspect, because what they tell us is that in other games they've got to make up stories to kind of tell their audience, but in our games it comes with a story that's ready made and something for them to tell and educate almost. I feel most excited about this part of it. If you ask me, we're very close to our close beta release. It comes out in a week from now. So getting players to kind of ultimately put the game in the hands of players, right? We have 50,000 Discord members. Putting the game in the hands of, we think that the players ultimately own our game. We're just custodians of it. So putting it in the true owner's hands is kind of what we are very excited about, to get that real feedback, see those bugs, fix those, but also see players play it. The esport players who played our game at the last playtest blew our minds away. They played the game so differently and they showed us a skill ceiling that we did not know existed in our game. So that's what I'm very excited about, to tell that story, but also excited about the inspiration that an Indus can create inside of India. We kind of feel like a lot of game developers let us down with poorly made games. And we're hoping that people can look at our game and say, that's a well made game, or that truly represents me. And I'm hoping that the 3 years of hard work that my team has put in kind of reflects in the game itself as players play it. And I'm also looking forward to the thousands of bugs that we'll have to fix.
Oh yeah.
That's something that we know exists. That's part of our journey. We've been around for a long time. But that's kind of what I'm looking forward to most, of being able to kind of finally play the game with my players. Because, we've played it for so long and it feels almost evil to hold it back within our studio. It's time that we put it in the hands of our players.
Yeah, and I'm not a regular mobile shooter player. I'm more play more on console, but I this is the kind of game even for myself I'm looking.
PC and console coming soon.
Okay, okay, okay. I'll take that. I could totally play on a PS. Very exciting. Well, Roby, thanks a lot for your time, which sharing your
Right.
energy, your passion. And I want to give a special, I don't know, kudos and also recognition for the whole team, including you,
Thank you.
for what you've created, because the game, through, I would say, any cells of its body, its soul, is feels Indian. You know, in every, it's you will go so deep in how you make a game and in all the elements of a game, and that's very inspiring, I think, for anyone maybe not coming from the West, exactly coming from other countries, to create a properly culturally adapted or even evolutive game to go that
Correct.
far. And
Thank
that
you.
will be very aspirational for others.
I think that's all kudos to my team. I work with probably
Mm.
the best people that I've ever worked with in my life. And I've kind of enjoyed working with them and seeing, whatever you see is not us, it's the collective, all of us kind of putting it out there. And I feel, humbled by the amount of talent that there is kind of bringing out all of this content.
Mm. Well, good luck with the launch and conversation with the community, fixing bugs and so on. And I'll make sure also to promote and give all the love of the game to the rest of the world who could enjoy it.
Thank you, Sophie. Thank you for talking about us and thank you for sharing our story. Pleasure.
Thank you, Robbie. Take care.